To Welcome to the Lower Hudson Special Education Task Force entitled Portrait of a Graduate, New York Inspires, a New Roadmap Toward Success with One Diploma for All. Hopefully that is what you signed up for. And if you did not, I encourage you to stick around because this is really going to be very informative. And you will learn a lot about some of what New York State has in mind for our students. For those of you who are not familiar with the task force, we are the regional arm of the New York State Special Education Task Force, which is run under the umbrella of Disabilities Rights New York. This task force seeks to bring together the full spectrum of stakeholders in special education in forums such as this one to exchange ideas and promote positive outcomes for students with disabilities. So I am currently the executive chairperson. As I said, my name is Debbie Goddard, and with me today is my co-chair, Jennifer Lamont, and several of our executive committee members. If I don't call your name, please forgive me because I can't see everybody sliding by me very quickly. I know Marian is here. Hi, Marian. I saw Julie. Hello, Mary Ellen. I saw Jessica. Welcome to you all. So recently adopted recommendations connected to New York Inspires plan will provide changes over the next few years on graduation requirements. New York Inspires aligns to the Blue Ribbon Commission on Graduation Measures. The plan covers 4 pivotal areas: a statewide portrait of a graduate, shifts to credit requirements and structures, one diploma for all students, and sunsetting the assessment requirements for graduation. During this session, our presenter will review current graduation requirements, let us understand the context for the massive shifts of New York Inspires plan, and discuss current elements and timelines for the 4 pivotal areas mentioned. So we are honored to be joined by Fred Ende, Director of Curriculum and Instruction Services at Putnam, Northern Westchester BOCES. As a reminder, the presentation is being recorded. We did receive some questions prior to, which Fred will probably address in the presentation, but we do encourage you to continue to put questions in the chat, and if they're not covered, he will cover them at the end. Fred, I will let you take it over.
Thank you, Debbie, and thanks everyone for being here. I'm really appreciative of the team reaching out and saying, is this something that we could talk a little bit about and explore? And so looking at the number of participants, right, with 71 people here, clearly this is something that is on everyone's minds, and you should give yourselves a pat on the back for being here, giving up a little bit of a very busy day to learn and talk a little bit about something we'll be seeing quite a bit of over the next 4, 5, 6 years. And as Debbie shared, the goal for today is going to be to give you a bit of an overview of where this plan sits in connection with current regulations, what we can expect based on what we know now of the shift in graduation measures. And then, as Debbie also mentioned, a number of questions were submitted. I've added them to the slide deck. We'll have the chance to talk about them, hopefully sometime, for other questions that you have as well. And the slide deck itself will be shared with you as a follow-up, so you can use for your own kind of learning and then to pass on to others as well. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll kick it off. So let me dive right in. Go into slideshow mode. So my contact information is provided, right? And so if at any time you have questions related to this, the shifting landscape of education in New York State, feel free to use me as a resource. I won't pretend to know the answer to every question, but I'm usually pretty good at least making connections for people. So I may not know, but chances are I probably know who can get you to, so you can get the answers that you need. And so this is a great opportunity to dive into, my opinion, an incredibly exciting shift in New York's graduation process. What I'll be sharing is basically information that's come directly from the state. There is a little bit of my interpretation in here. I will clarify things that are my interpretation versus what we know to be definitely true at this point in time. And so as Debbie shared, here's kind of the four big buckets of what we hope to explore this early afternoon. We'll take a look at why we're even having this conversation, right? What does the current model look like? What are some of the changes that we can expect? And then we'll dive into questions that you've raised or that you're thinking about as we wrap up our session. So there are really two reasons why a commission was even created at the state level to explore the appropriateness of current graduation measures. One of those was because it's become increasingly clear over time that there are inequities in the educational experiences for students across New York State. That is, yes, across the state, and it's also incredibly clear within our own region, in this part of New York. The other piece that the states wanted to address is that, and again, this is not interpretation, this is clear, the skills that students are leaving school systems with now and the proficiency measures that we utilize do not adequately measure what students need in order to be successful in college and career and whatever future life has for students. So the Blue Ribbon Commission was not only brought together to look at ways to create equitable educational experiences across New York, but also to make sure that students are leaving their high school experience with the knowledge and skills they need to succeed in whatever their pathway is after K-12. And so I wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about the current model because having an understanding of where we are now will help you understand the shift moving forward. And so New York's current system is based on a credit and assessment structure in order to graduate. What I will share is that any of the slides that have the New York State Education Department logo in the bottom come direct from our state education department, right? They've been used in various presentations that our department has utilized, right? So this is like literally straight from our state education department. You'll also find a number of links in the slides that will be shared with you. Those will take you direct to additional information about whatever those topics are. So here's the credit distribution. You can see that the way it currently exists, it's tied to a variety of disciplines, right, across the entire academic spectrum. And the way students earn credit is through completing a unit of study, generating credit by examination. There's a lot here that we won't go into. I will tell you that there are links here that dive into some questions that tend to arise both in school systems and communities, right? Like, so for instance, how do students take advantage of independent study, right? And so there's an entire component to the commissioner's regulations, the Part 100 regulations, that talks about this. So you may find as a community member, a parent, an advocate, having access to some of these regulations valuable in your own work as well, right? The general idea, though, is you either complete a unit of study or you earn credit by taking and scoring a certain value on an examination, right? And complete a project with it. On the assessment side, right, so there's the two components. There's the credit, which we just briefly talked about, and then there's an assessment component. And the way the assessment component exists currently in New York State is students have to take, right, and succeed on 4 either Regents exams or approved alternative assessments in 4 key disciplines, right? So English, language arts, science, social studies, and mathematics. Then there's an additional pathway exam or experience that students also have to complete. And so that might involve an additional Regents exam. Many of you might remember, if you grew up in New York State, that this wasn't always the case. It used to be like you passed 5 Regents exams, right? And there were 2 social studies that you passed, right? Now, students have the option to pursue their own pathway for that +1 experience. And you'll see them on the right of the slide and explore it in a little more detail here, right? So sometimes it might be a student takes an additional Regents exam in a math course or humanities related course, right? Like the additional social studies exam, or they could complete a CDOS credential, or complete a CTE program, or earn the seal of civic readiness, or the individual arts assessment pathway. So there are a number of different experiences that students can take advantage of in the current model, right? It's tied to what districts offer, of course, but it doesn't all have to be directly tied to Regents exams, right? So there is a pathway that exists for students to have some choice in what the assessment side of the requirements looks like. And that takes us to our current diploma structure, right? So there are 3 diploma types that students can earn, all require the credit elements and differ based on how assessments play a role. The Regents diploma is the diploma for which what we just talked about is based on, but there's the local diploma and the one with advanced designation. The local diploma utilizes appeals, safety nets, superintendent's determination to move students towards meeting graduation requirements. The Regents with advanced designation move students towards meeting graduation requirements through the inclusion of additional exams. And so in order for students to graduate, they have to be able to meet credit requirements and assessment requirements that place them in one of the 3 diploma types. Right? So that's kind of like the current structure and the way it exists. Our future model makes some significant shifts that takes a kind of like binary process of thinking about credits and assessments and flips it on its head in some ways. Debbie had mentioned the 4 transformations that are part of the shift. We'll talk about each of them in a little bit of detail. Some of these are already well defined. Others have not been explored much at the state level yet at all. And so the first one, which is the movement towards a statewide portrait of a graduate, has already been approved. Regulation was put together and approved this summer for the portrait of a graduate that you are looking at on screen. There's a link within the deck that takes you to a larger blow-up image. In short, this portrait will serve as the kind of like umbrella for benchmarks that students will have to meet in order to graduate. And as you look around the portrait wheel, you'll see that yes, right, like being academically prepared is on there, and so is being a creative innovator, a global citizen, reflective, critical thinker, an effective communicator. And centralized in it, right, are the ideals of the culturally responsive and sustaining education framework, right? And so the importance of designing a graduation pathway that is inclusive, right, that all students can take part in. The bottom of the portrait, you'll see really higher order descriptors for what each of these 6 elements around the portrait circle are all about. And what we'll be receiving from the education department over the next few months will be a series of rubrics and guidance documents that will allow schools and districts to more deeply understand, you know, what does it look like for a creative innovator at the high school level, middle school, elementary. Because one of the one of the action items that will be taking place in schools and districts over the next few years is making sure that the pathways that are provided to students allow them to showcase proficiency in each of these key components, right? So it is a really, and this is me speaking now, right? Not on behalf of PNW BOCES or the state, but as a parent myself, I have a 15-year-old, right? And she will only marginally be impacted by these changes. And then I also have a 7th grader who will really see the full impact of these changes. For me, I'm incredibly excited about the opportunity for more students to find pathways that really align with who they are as learners and people to graduate from our state, right? I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity. One of the things we'll also see is that this process will redefine what we've come to know as credits. It's unlikely that the current credit structure we looked at a few minutes ago will be able to exist in the same way under a new structure, particularly with graduation proficiency being shown through things like portfolios or capstone projects, additional work in service-based learning. And what we'll also see, beginning likely next year, will be the inclusions of some additional instructional components that have never been required before in our state, one of which is financial literacy, the other of which is climate education. And what we'll also see embedded more fully, particularly at the high school level, will be CTE, right? Career and technical education opportunities for students. This is, of course, the transformation that the media has kind of grabbed onto because it's probably the one that has the most opportunity to be somewhat divisive across communities. The Regents exams have been a mainstay within New York State for a very long time. In fact, I'd imagine that if you're on the call and you graduated from New York State, right, you took Regents exams as a measure of your graduation capability during your time in your school system. What will happen as part of this plan is that the Regents exams will no longer be requirements for graduation. What will not happen as part of this plan is that the Regents exams will not go away. So this isn't a removal of the Regents exams from New York State's educational structure, but it is the removal of the requirement that Regents exams be incorporated into the graduation process. Some schools may still offer the Regents exams as a pathway towards graduation, but all students will not need to take and successfully complete the Regents exams as a marker of whether they are graduation ready. What is important to note is that item towards the bottom of the slide, Regents exams can't go away because they're currently tied to federal accountability and funding requirements. So students will still need to take some state level exams during their academic progression in their school districts, not for graduation reasons, but because the federal government requires New York State to do that for New York State to meet all of its requirements for some of its state funding. And then the last piece, which I also really think brings a lot of value, is the movement towards one diploma that all students earn. There will no longer be 3 different diploma types. Instead, there will be one New York State high school graduation diploma, right? It will remove the local and advanced designation diploma components, and it will give districts the opportunity to choose whether they want to add additional endorsements or seals. So for instance, a district could choose to create its own advanced designation structure if they were so inclined. But New York would not be creating separate diplomas as markers of different types of graduation statuses. So these are the two models side by side. And so it gives you a little bit of a sense in a basic visual of how things are proposed to change over these next 5 or 6 years. So I did want to share a little bit of the timeline with you, so you got a sense of what your communities will be experiencing these next few years. This is where we just came from. So last year was really considered a planning year. Our state education department laid the foundations and groundwork for some of these experiences, including sharing a draft of the state portrait, some early definitions, building a statewide support and communication network to share this information, right? And so, this is an example of us doing that, me kind of having this chance to meet with all of you and share some of this information with various groups that exist across New York. And here's where we are now. And so the portrait was released this summer. As I mentioned a couple minutes ago, there'll be some guidance, some rubrics that will be shared out to the broader field over the next few months. The department is working to redesign some elements of all of the state's academic standards to include connectors to the portrait of a graduate. And as I shared previously, we'll start to see some additional instructional requirements in financial literacy, climate education, rolling out over the course of the next year. Once we reach the fall of 2027, right, so that's the cohort that will start to experience these changes most profoundly. This is my younger daughter, right? This is like when she enters 9th grade. So this is her cohort. The 9th graders in the fall of 2027 and beyond will be the ones who really experience most of the changes in this plan. So that year, right, the state will shift to one diploma. The assessment requirements will sunset. What that means, and this is a really interesting component for students who are in school systems at the moment. Right now, the current regulations are still in place, right? So all the assessment requirements that have existed in the past still exist. Even though we're talking about the sunsetting, until those regulations are actually codified, nothing changes. So what's important as you think about your own roles as parents, guardians, community members, advocates, in whatever position you hold, it's important to recognize that what we're talking about is what we anticipate will happen, and it hasn't happened yet, right? At least everything on this slide. We've released the portrait. The portrait's been approved and adopted, but these items have not taken place yet. And so this is also the cohort for the entering 9th grade in the fall of 2027 would also be the cohort that will have additional CTE requirements that they will need to complete in order to graduate. It's also the cohort that will start to engage with earning credit in different ways than has been the case prior. And then in the fall of 2029 and beyond, right? So I know it's funny to be thinking about like, okay, like 4 or 5 years from now, right? But that cohort will also have all of the statewide changes in place, because one of the things that will ultimately be an end result of this shift is a statewide transcript. So right now, right, our schools and districts have similarities that are built into their transcript designs, but each school really crafts their transcript model in the way that currently suits their needs. The rationale behind a statewide transcript is to help in providing parity and equity in student experiences across the state, and to support those students who may move from one location to another so that everyone is basically speaking the same transcript language. This is a nice visual of some of the big changes over the course of the next 5 years. It just takes what we just shared and places it and organizes it in a different way of looking at it, but maybe a valuable slide to share as an overarching way of thinking about this work and these changes. So I wanted to share a few recent updates. Our State Board of Education meets each month, and when they meet, part of their goal, besides sharing general updates, is to codify amendments to regulations that affect all of us in some way. And so these were some updates from early this year, July, September, and then October. The board normally takes a recess in August and normally doesn't meet. And the October meeting, which just happened last week, did not have changes pertaining to New York Inspires and the portrait. So what you'll see in the slide deck that you will receive is a link to some additional portrait resources. The state has shared a number of flyers / info sheets on the portrait for various stakeholder groups that you might find valuable for the constituents you work in partnership with. There was additional information released on the portrait that dove into some more portrait components that's linked there. And then the last bullet item is one we'll hear a little bit more about next month in November as the state kind of rolls out its thinking on how schools will be embedding climate education and financial literacy work into school systems and the K-12 progression. So I wanted to take a couple minutes to discuss and go over some of the questions that you submitted ahead of time. And then I'm happy to, for our team, to open it up for questions, thoughts that people want to inquire about. As I shared, you'll have access to the slide deck, which embeds the answers to those questions that were shared ahead of time. And then, as I also want to share, there is a lot about this that we don't know the answer to yet, simply because as a multi-year plan, there are some components that are being explored in detail at the moment, and some others that may not be deeply developed until later on in this schedule. So we'll dive into a couple questions that came to me. So questions about impact on special education students, right, which we could also project out to other student subgroups and demographics. The portrait will be the guiding foundation for all students within New York State. So those elements of the portrait are designed to be applicable and valuable for every student who goes to school in New York. Will children who enter high school before the rollout date still have to follow the Regents' requirements, right? And the short answer, right, if special education, if not special education, until the time when the regulations are changed, all current credit and assessment requirements continue. So even though we know there will be some shifts around assessment requirements in 2 years, for the present time, for any students moving throughout the middle or high school system where exams would be required, those same rules are in place and won't shift until a new amendment to those regulations is made, which won't be this year, likely won't be until significantly later in the 2026-2027 school year. So for the time being, nothing shifts for any of our students. When are these changes expected to be fully implemented? It's a great question. And what does this mean for kids who are already in high school or in any level of our school systems? The State Education Department is hoping that by the 2029-2030 school year, that all changes are fully implemented. It is a hope. It's an anticipated timeline. Anything can change. What I don't believe would happen would be a quicker timeline. What is certainly possible is that the full rollout could take a little bit longer. Students who are in high school now will be impacted by these changes to varying degrees as they happen, right? For students who are in elementary or early middle school, they'll more likely see the full experience and impact of these changes. Timeline for special needs students to receive a diploma. As of this point, FAPE to 21 or 22, right, depending on how things continue to develop, is a separate piece here. My current understanding is that there is no shift to the timeline of providing special education students with free and public education, right? So I believe, because I haven't seen anything otherwise, that is a separate kind of focal point and will still apply and is not in any way touched through the New York Inspires regulation changes. Special education options, right? These changes will apply to all students. We will learn more about additional support structures that the state builds out, but nothing has been identified for specific student subgroups yet. Same with that second question on the slide. How do these proposed timelines affect those students who are on accelerated paths and might take a Regents exam in middle school? So one of the things that we may find, schools who have embedded accelerated pathways into their middle schools may find that they're not as interested in doing that in the same way and may not need to be looking at offering Regents at the middle school in exactly the same way. Certainly, because this new model is all about recognizing students where they are and supporting them to meet their individual needs, schools will still have the opportunity to embed pathways towards accelerated experiences, but they won't have to utilize Regents exams as a marker for that. Will Regents exams be phased out entirely? So no, right? They will not. And it's really important for us to also remind our networks and constituents of that. Students will still have to take some of these exams for federal requirements. They will not have to take them for graduation purposes, but unless New York State modifies its federal ESSA plan, and unless the federal government approves those modifications, the tests still exist as something within the New York system and are still required to be taken for accountability purposes. When will they be phased out? Phasing out applies as to it as a graduation requirement. They will be phased out as a graduation requirement in the current thinking, in the current plan, in the 2027 through 2028 school year. New York timeline for rolling out this new plan, right? So generally the timeline slides take us to 2029, 2030 as the year when all of these changes are implemented. And as I mentioned, that may or may not change over time. I have a ninth grader. Will he have to pass the Regents to get a diploma in 2029? So the way that the state has shared their thinking on this at this point is that until the regulations change, students in schools still operate as if nothing was different. So if a student is in a Regents culminating class that they would need to take in order to graduate, then they would still take that Regents. It would still be a part of their graduation requirement for now. How changes diploma? Yeah, so to go back to that, these changes will apply to all students. If there's any additional special education support structures, we don't know what those will look like at the moment just yet. So, a couple more. What diploma, if a student is working towards advanced Regents now and they expect to graduate in June 2028, what diploma will they get? So students who are graduating in the spring of 2028 are the first cohort who the state is anticipating will graduate with one unified diploma. What that diploma will be called or how it will be titled, we don't yet know, but that would be the first graduating cohort where there is only one diploma type in New York State. Students currently enrolled in high school going to benefit from this change to some degree. Yes, the younger the grade of a current student, the more potential impact they'll have. Clearly, students at the elementary level or those just beginning middle school will have the greatest impact. Need for work-based experiences increase in the new model. Can credits be achieved through volunteering? So this model would potentially allow schools and districts to embed more work-based experiences. And based on the new credit models, could really provide, and again, this is me just speaking, a really like exciting opportunity to assess proficiency and mastery in ways that we are not currently allowing for in most cases. So that was kind of like the extent of the questions that came to me. Debbie and team, I'm happy to take some time as makes sense for any other questions that exist and to however you want to handle that. I have not looked at the chat. I don't know if there's anything in there, but I can pull it up and look.
Alyssa, do you see any additional questions?
Yep, there are a few questions entered into the chat, and if folks have additional questions, we will make sure that they are passed along to the presenter.
All right. So we do have a couple of minutes, so maybe Alyssa, if you don't mind sharing those with Fred, and he can address them in the time that we have left.
Yep, you should see them in your chat panel.
Let's see. So I'm looking. I see a question from Debbie. Let's look. I see. Okay, perfect. So so a question came in. What does CTE represent? Thanks for, sometimes we live in like a world of abbreviations, right? So I appreciate that question. CTE stands for Career and Technical Education. And so that would be everything from what we might often think of HVAC work, plumbing, auto body, to also the state's talked about expanding its definition of CTE to incorporate other work-based experiences like work in financial literacy, potentially math-based experiences like accounting, right? So the kind of like general definition has been around what we might consider the technical careers and experiences, but the state has also talked about expanding it. Another question, can pupils possibly take Regents exam if they have significant disabilities or on the autism spectrum disorder, in terms of how things will shift moving forward and how districts might make decisions about when Regents exams are used for meeting any of the portrait's purposes or not. That is going to be a local decision. No students will need to take the Regents exams for graduation. As I shared before, some districts may choose to offer completion of a Regents exam as a pathway to addressing some of the elements of the portrait. So again, I don't think it would be a fair expectation for any parent, community member, advocate to imagine they would be removed from school systems. Their use will just be different, which ultimately will stand to benefit all students. Okay, let me pop in. Here's a couple. Will these changes allow students who are alternately assessed to receive a diploma? Yeah, so the idea here is that every New York State student will be looking to earn that foundational New York State diploma. And because there will be a greater variety of ways for students to show proficiency, the current plan and thinking is that all students, right, will be working towards meeting the benchmarks within the portrait to showcase their graduation. What that looks like in practice across the state is still to be determined. But yes, I mean, the changes being made are meant to help all student subgroups feel as if they can effectively showcase their graduation proficiency. If a student receiving special education graduates prior to diploma changes taking place, will there be an option for them to? It's such a good question. This question is about retroactivity for diplomas, diploma access. It's a question I don't know the answer to yet. One that I think is worth really paying attention to as this work develops, and I will happily share information as I get more of it to answer that. Current juniors need to have climate education as part of their graduation requirements, I suppose, next year, and they will be seniors graduating. So here's what we know about the climate education and financial literacy requirements at the moment. They are not slated to be graduation requirements. They're instructional requirements, which is a little bit different. So the idea would be that schools and districts would embed elements of financial literacy, climate education, K-12, for all students, but there would not be a credit requirement or graduation requirement tied to that instruction. Really what's anticipated so far, and again, any of this can change, is that there will be basically a certification by superintendent or school official that those instructional requirements have been built into the student experience. There's a couple more. What's the biggest difference between the fall 2027 and fall 2029 rollout? So the fall 2027 rollout will be the one where we start to see the most visible changes. There'll be requirements, additional requirements for career and technical education for incoming high school students that year. We'll start to see the Regents removed from graduation requirements. We'll see new credit structures. In fall of 2029, kind of like everything is in place, right? Like all students who are then kind of like in the high school mix are experiencing all of those changes at the grades 9 through 12 level. The other big piece that year will be this idea of a unified statewide transcript, which has some really nice implications for equity and inclusivity across the state, and then also for pathways to higher ed, right, in the post-secondary experiences, whether it's college or career or other experiences that students take on. Let's see. What about things like co-op arrangements? Say this was a long way back when. Sounds like under the new model, this might be yes. So what was asked in this question is, if you're doing any type of co-op work or work experiences during the school day, how does that factor in? And from the information we have so far, so long as schools and districts would be willing to look at those experiences as helping to meet, let's say, effective communicator guidelines or creative innovator guidelines or whatever might be the best fit, then yes, right? Those are the types of experiences that would go towards a student showcasing proficiency in one or more of those portrait components. So there's a really great opportunity to build closer connections in with local businesses, outside organizations, charitable groups, to help give students multiple experiences that extend beyond the academic side of like a school experience. And I think I got them all, team. I think I don't see any more.
I think, am I missing this one? How is it expected that the number of units of study for each subject area will change?
Oh, that is an important question, and one that at this point we don't have the answer to. What I feel confident saying is that there is a real desire by our education department to provide greater flexibility in how students earn credit. Right now, it is incredibly discipline specific, and part of the hope is to provide more opportunity for students to explore areas of both interest and passion while still giving them well-rounded exposure to different areas of learning. One thing that does have to change, though, is that in order for that to happen, the state's education certification process would need to shift. So right now, if you are in, let's say, the classroom teaching unit, you have a certificate that is tied to a discipline. And in some disciplines, like science, those certificates to teach are even more stratified, right? Like a chemistry certified teacher isn't supposed to be teaching a biology classroom. And so it becomes really hard to unsilo the classes that teachers teach. And so one of the hopes is that this will help provide greater flexibility in how schools and districts utilize the expertise of various educators on their teams. And by making it more flexible, it would allow for wider buckets for credit, meeting some of these units of study, etc.
All right, I think that is the last one I have seen. Thank you so much, Mr. Ende. You have shared an incredible amount of information with us. Luckily, we get to listen to it again because Alyssa will be sending out the recording and the PowerPoint presentation. Thank you all for coming in again. Thank you so much. Mr. Endy's email address is attached to that PowerPoint. So if you have additional questions, please reach out to him. As he said, if he has the answers, he will share them or he
I
will
will.
find them. So thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.